In the quiet woods of Vermont, a family moved into a cheap wooden house, believing it would mend the fractures left by years of exhaustion. The scent of old ash clung to every grain of timber, and the slanted walls seemed to be listening. At night, the house groaned as though something shifted within its very bones. Footsteps echoed from a hallway that did not exist. Beyond the window, a flickering light revealed the silhouette of another house, one that had burned to the ground decades ago. Yet it seemed still alive, still waiting for them to step inside. The narrow dirt road leading to the old wooden house seemed swallowed in mist. Tires crunched over layers of rotting leaves, leaving behind damp, faded tracks. The house appeared, small, yet heavy, sagging as though burdened by winters that had never truly ended. Its dark roof was mottled, its wooden walls bleached gray by wind, its windows jutting out like hollow, sunken eyes. Outside, the silence was so complete that the only sound was the wind threading through the trees, carrying with it the chill of decayed earth. The husband lingered on the porch, sensing a stifling presence in the air, as though the house were not empty at all, but waiting. The wife trailed behind, her eyes sweeping over every detail, half eager, half wary. Their daughter hurried ahead, feigning indifference, but her gaze kept darting toward the shadows that pooled in the cracks of the shutters. Inside, the smell of old ash mingled with mildew, thick and clinging, as if a fire had only recently been extinguished. The wooden floorboards groaned underfoot, the sound echoing unnaturally long for an empty room. On the right wall, a charred stain spread, gray-black, like a handprint pressed into the grain. A hallway stretched forward only to end abruptly against a blank wall, senseless, like a doorway that had been sealed shut. The wife froze, fingertips brushing the cold timber, feeling a hollow resonance from the other side. The window looked out toward the forest, but the view bent and warped like a fractured mirror. For a fleeting second, the dim reflection showed not the empty yard, but a long dining table, chairs gathered around it, an oil lamp flickering above a meal already set. When the wife blinked, only the thick canopy of mist-shrouded trees remained. That first night, the creaking never ceased, chairs and tables shifting in rooms that did not exist. Footsteps padded softly down the hallway, stopping just behind the sealed wall. The husband reassured himself. It was only the old house settling. Yet at times he felt cold breath grazing the back of his neck, though every window was shut tight. The wife lay still, listening to the faint clink of a spoon against glass echoing from nearby, a sound that rang once, then faded, leaving silence heavier than the dark itself. In the attic, dust lay thick, but small footprints pressed clear trails toward a corner where no exit existed. In a crumbling notebook found in a drawer, shaky handwriting scrawled a few desperate lines. The second house they never left. The page was torn, the ink blurred as though by tears. The house fell quiet again, but it was a silence damp, oppressive, swallowing every breath. And somewhere beyond the sealed wall, a faint sound stirred, the scrape of a chair being pulled out, ready for a guest who had just arrived. Nya. Morning crept in slowly, its pale light swallowed by the thick veil of mist, leaving only scattered beams filtering through the windows. The wife tidied the living room, her hands carefully moving each worn object. Beneath the dusty rug, the floorboards revealed deep scratches, long grooves as if chairs and tables had been dragged across the wood. The marks were so fresh that tiny splinters still clung to them, as though someone had moved the furniture just the night before. The daughter wandered down the hallway, her gaze settling on a round window. The glass was cloudy, yet when she stared into it, the reflection was not the familiar room behind her. Instead, she saw another space, a long dining table draped in white cloth, chairs neatly arranged, oil lamps glowing invitingly. Faint silhouettes gathered around, their heads tilted as though in conversation. She raised her hand to the glass, but the surface was icy cold, reflecting only her own uneasy eyes. When she stepped back, the vision vanished, leaving behind only the cracked pane and its gray dust. On the second night, as the house fell still, the strange sounds rose again. The clink of spoons against glasses, the scrape of chairs dragged over wood, the muffled hum of a feast that never ended. Footsteps crept along the hallway, stopping just behind the sealed wall. A soft knocking began, measured, patient, as if someone were trying to open the door long buried. In the bedroom, the husband gazed into the mirror, weary eyes fixed on his own reflection. But for an instant, he was no longer alone. Behind him, the dining table shimmered into view. Chairs filled, shadowy figures lifting their glasses. They had no faces, only blurred voids. A pale hand rested on his shoulder in the glass, but when he turned, the room was empty, the mirror reflecting only his solitary frame. The wife could not sleep. At midnight, she wandered the hallway. The floor bowed gently beneath her steps, creaking like a heavy breath. She froze when she saw that the end of the corridor seemed longer than before. A door had appeared there, black, without a handle. As she approached, the narrow crack revealed only a fathomless dark beyond. From inside came whispers, layered voices overlapping, calling someone's name. She shut her eyes, and when she opened them, the wall was solid again, unbroken, as if nothing had changed. The next morning, the daughter sat quietly with her sketchbook. On the page was a drawing of their house, but inside it brimmed with chairs, lamps, and faceless guests. Their eyes were blank hollows. She shaded the doorway heavily, scrawling 2 words across the bottom: "Come in." Later, the husband searched the basement for tools. The dim light spilled over rough stone walls, where the floor was stained with old blackened ash. Sifting through it, he found a half-burned slip of paper. The trembling handwriting read, "They are still waiting at the table." By the third night, the house itself shuddered like a creature stirring awake. The lights flickered, shadows stretching unnaturally, the hallway lengthening with each passing minute. Laughter echoed faintly, distant yet growing clearer, as though the feast beyond the wall was reaching its liveliest moment. And from the depths of the dark came a drawn-out sound, scraping through the silence, the slow drag of a chair being pulled out, waiting for a new place to be filled. Morning came, but the light was too weak to chase away the chill. Inside the house, the space itself seemed to have shifted, though no one had touched a thing. Small objects, a stool, an old picture frame, a forgotten book on the table, moved subtly from their places. At times, they returned facing the wrong way, as though someone had used them and then set them back, but not quite right. The wife stood frozen in the living room. She watched the curtains stir, though no breeze passed, and beyond the glass appeared again the shadow of a glowing room. Inside it, the long table was now heavy with food, empty glasses raised in a silent toast. The faces remained pale and blurred, yet their presence was sharpening, growing more defined. When night fell, the sounds no longer came in scattered fragments, but in a relentless chorus. Footsteps circled the hallway, doors slammed from beyond the sealed wall, breaths seeped from imagined cracks. When the wife stepped into the corridor, she found it stretching farther than before. No wall stopped her this time. At the far end stood a strange wooden door, slightly ajar. From within, a fathomless darkness exhaled cold air that wrapped around her. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure moving in the shadows, but when she blinked, it was gone. Only a flat, silent wall remained. The daughter sank deeper into restless dreams. In them, she sat inside the other house, the one bathed in light. Around her gathered faceless guests, laughing, pouring wine, striking spoons against glasses in a celebration that never ended. Beside her, a seat was always kept empty, waiting. Each time she hesitated, laughter echoed, urging her to sit. When she woke, the sound of clinking glasses still lingered in her ears. The husband, desperate for answers, pored over architectural sketches he had found in the town library. There, he saw what could no longer be denied. This house once had a twin built alongside it. Decades ago, a wildfire consumed the other, yet its foundation was never unearthed. The final note from the architect chilled him. The two cannot be separated. One gone, one remains. The remaining will forever seek the one it lost. When darkness descended again, the house trembled faintly, like the beat of a heart. Shadows stretched long, clinging to the floor, as if trying to climb upward. For a fleeting moment, the family felt it together. They were no longer the owners of this place. The house was expanding, plank by plank, wall by wall, making room for another presence to press in. And somewhere in that deepening dark, another chair scraped back, pulled out, waiting for the one who had just been chosen. Nenda, Namd. Night fell faster than usual. The last light of dusk was swallowed whole, leaving a dense darkness pressing in around the house. When the yellow ceiling lamp flickered on, it sputtered, its glow shivering as if being consumed by something unseen. The hallway now stretched unnaturally long, its damp, mottled walls carrying the weight of centuries. The wife pressed her face to the window pane, and this time it was no fleeting vision. Across the yard, the twin house stood clear, glowing bright as though in celebration. Its doors hung wide open, faceless silhouettes drifted in and out, glasses in hand, moving with an air of festivity. She saw the long table laden with food, steam curling upward, faint music drifting through the air, mingling with bursts of laughter. But when she blinked, it was gone. Only the motionless, black forest remained. The daughter could no longer resist the call of her dreams. At midnight, she vanished from her room. The wife, frantic, searched the house and froze at the sight before her. In what had always been an empty room, now stood the illuminated feast. Her daughter sat upright at the table, her eyes vacant, staring ahead. Around her, the faceless guests raised their glasses, tilting their heads in silent welcome. The wife stepped forward, but the air thickened like a veil, resisting her. She saw pale, bony hands settle on her daughter's shoulders, holding her gently, yet firmly, in place. Long white fingers tightened as the mother tried to press closer. The sound of the banquet swelled, echoing through the walls, laughter entwined with the clinking of spoons, a chorus welcoming their newest guest. The husband rushed in, desperate, reaching to pull his daughter back. But when his hands met her form, he felt only a frigid emptiness, slick as ice. Her body was fading, dissolving into another world. For a fleeting instant, he saw the second house in full, its wooden walls glowing, windows alight with fire, the banquet brimming with faceless revelers. Then it all blurred away, leaving only the dark, dust-choked room and a table draped in neglect. The wife collapsed to her knees, listening. From beyond the wall, the voices pressed harder, repeating their invitation in waves. Chairs scraped against the floor, many of them, as though the table were being set for more. The structure of their own home seemed to buckle, pushed aside, as another house forced itself into being within its walls. In that moment, the family understood. They were not merely living in an old cabin. They were sharing it with another house, still standing, still full, still expanding, until the feast that had never ended was finally complete. Nay, dawn never came. Time itself seemed suspended in endless night, broken only by the jaundiced glow of a single lamp casting light over the frigid room. The wife stirred awake, only to realize she was no longer in the old creaking bed. She sat at a brightly lit banquet table, surrounded by faceless guests. The air reeked of wine, roasted meat, and burning wood, but the scents only thickened the suffocating atmosphere. The blank heads turned toward her in unison, featureless yet heavy with the weight of hundreds of unseen eyes. Through the window of this new house, she saw the outline of the old one, the home they had moved into, now sunken in shadow, hollow, drained of life. Only one figure remained there. Her husband sat slumped in the dim room, his eyes locked on the wall. He could hear every laugh, every clink of raised glasses from the other side. Within the chorus of sound, his wife's and daughter's voices rang out, familiar yet estranged, calling his name in a haunting harmony. He pressed his palm against the cold wall, and from the other side, pale hands pressed back. Tin like ice, fingers long and bony, clawed at the seams of the wood, pulling, tugging, prying open a crack. Light from the banquet spilled through, flickering like a beckoning flame. The slow scrape of a chair echoed, deliberate, preparing for one final guest. The husband staggered back, trembling, but the house did not allow escape. The walls closed in, the hallway shortened. The ceiling sank lower, pressing the breath from his chest. The attic groaned, dust drifting down like glowing cinders in the dim light. All of it drove him back toward the widening fracture, where shadow and light shimmered together like a door ajar. Through the gap, he saw his wife and daughter seated side by side, their forms fading but recognizable. Their faces, however, were dissolving into pale voids, merging with the faceless beings gathered at the table. Though empty, they tilted their heads and raised their glasses in unison, offering an invitation impossible to resist. The laughter swelled, rising, shattering, drowning out the pounding of his heart. In his final moment, he laid his hand upon the crack. The door burst wide, golden light pouring through, swallowing the last remnants of darkness. The sound of a chair scraping out one final time groaned through the air, and then fell silent. The small wooden house in Vermont sank into utter stillness. Outside, the forest lay heavy with mist, unmoving, as though no one had ever lived there at all. But if one were to stand close at night, pressing an ear to the mildewed wall, they might still hear it. The clink of spoons against glasses, the scrape of chairs sliding back, and the endless banquet echoing from the twin house, where those who chose to sit down never rose again. Nah. In Adams, Tennessee, the legend of the Bell Witch has never faded. In the early 1800s, the Bell family was tormented by knocks on the door, disembodied voices and horrors so relentless that even President Andrew Jackson came to witness them. More than a century later, a young family moved into the old house, convinced it was nothing more than superstition. But when night falls, the knocking returns, cold, deliberate, uninvited, and a lullaby drifts from an empty room, a reminder that the curse has never loosened its grip. Nah. The dirt road into the outskirts of Adams was blanketed with brittle leaves and the damp rot of autumn. Behind the wheel, Nathan fixed his gaze on the house that slowly emerged through the oak trees. Beside him, Claire tightened her grip on his hand, while Emma, their young daughter, dozed in the back seat, clutching her wool-knitted doll like a talisman. The house appeared in fragments, then whole, an oppressive silhouette against the dying light. 2 stories of weathered gray wood leaned under a moss-cloaked roof. Its windows, dark and unblinking, resembled hollow sockets in a skull. Though the place had been given a thin coat of repair, it exuded a coldness, a refusal to welcome daylight. Nathan forced a smile, telling himself that the spacious rooms and bargain price made this the perfect beginning for their family. The only neighbor they encountered was a frail old man at the fence line. He paused, his eyes following them with a weary caution. When he finally spoke, it was almost a whisper. "The Bell House never rests." And then he turned away, leaving Nathan bewildered yet eager to dismiss the warning. Claire, however, had heard every word. Her face tightened, though she masked it quickly, unwilling to spread her unease. That evening, they shared their first meal in the wide, draft-ridden parlor. The old oil lamp sputtered, casting a sickly amber glow. From the wall, a portrait loomed. An austere man with cavernous eyes. Emma kept glancing at it, whispering that, "He doesn't want me sitting here." Claire soothed her gently, chalking it up to childish imagination, though her own skin prickled beneath the gaze of that painted stare. When Emma finally drifted into sleep, Nathan and Claire noticed the sounds. At first faint, then deliberate, 3 measured knocks, steady as a heartbeat, echoing through the bedroom wall. Nathan laughed it off, muttering something about pipes. But Claire remained awake, her eyes fixed on the dark ceiling. To her, the rhythm felt less like plumbing and more like a signal, someone knocking patiently from the other side. From the hallway, the wind pressed through the cracks of the doorframe, carrying with it the sharp, earthy scent of soil freshly turned, damp and ancient. The house, silent to the ear, seemed to murmur in its own secret tongue. The new Bell family had come seeking peace. Instead, they had stepped into the echo of a curse that had never truly died. Nash. Oh no. The second night passed, and the knocking returned. This time, it was no longer scattered. 3 sharp knocks in succession, then silence, only to begin again, steady, deliberate, like a hand tapping with patient insistence on the walls themselves. Claire stirred awake, her body stiff with unease. Nathan still slept deeply, but she knew at once these were not pipes, not branches scraping the roof. The sound carried a weight that seemed to rise from inside the house itself. Slipping from bed, she crept down the hallway. The house was a cavern of shadow, moonlight spilling weakly through dust-streaked windows. As she neared Emma's room, Claire froze, heart pounding. From within came a lullaby. A woman's voice, soft, steady, humming a tune worn thin by time. The melody was slow, trembling, soaked in the drawl of the Old South. The bedroom door stood ajar. Claire pushed it open an inch and saw Emma sound asleep, clutching her ragged doll to her chest. The child's lips were still, yet the lullaby continued. rising from the empty rocking chair by the window. Claire slammed the door shut, clutching her chest, and did not dare close her eyes again until morning. By dawn, Nathan was too busy unpacking to notice the hollows under her eyes. He only laughed, insisting she was letting the house get to her. But when Claire carried breakfast to the table, her blood ran cold. The rocking chair in Emma's room, no longer in its corner, now faced the bed directly, as though someone had sat there all night, watching. The day brought no comfort. Picture frames slid from walls without a draft. A chair swayed gently, though the floor was still. And Emma, while playing alone, whispered to her mother that she had seen a lady in a white dress step through the bathroom mirror. Claire steadied her voice and asked if the woman had a face. Emma shook her head. No, she never turns around. That evening, Nathan finally saw what Claire feared. As he sat reading in the parlor, the window burst open, though the night outside was breathless and still. A gust of cold air tore through, flinging the book from his hands. And in that fleeting moment, as he bent to retrieve it, he swore he saw her. A pale figure in a long white dress, hair falling like a curtain, gliding across the mirror's surface before vanishing with the blink of an eye. That night, the lullaby returned. Its ghostly cadence swelled through every room, wrapping around them like a shroud. Nathan gathered his wife and daughter close, straining to appear unshaken. Yet in the pit of his stomach, the old man's words returned. The bell house is never at rest. And when the clock struck 12, the knocking began again. 3 heavy raps, not from the walls this time, but from the bedroom door itself. Someone, unseen, was waiting patiently in the hallway, asking to be let inside. Nah, wow. In the days that followed, the Bell family home offered Nathan's household not a single moment of peace. The knocking grew constant, echoing at all hours, sometimes frantic, sometimes measured, like an unseen hand drumming out its own deliberate rhythm. Claire bore the brunt of it. One evening, while preparing dinner, she heard a faint whisper right behind her. A woman's voice, fragile, repeating her name again and again and again. She spun around, nothing but the empty kitchen. Yet the mirror above the sink had gone cloudy, the glass fogged as though someone had breathed against it. And in its surface she did not see herself, but a woman in a white dress, standing motionless, hair spilling forward to hide her face. Claire screamed, dropping the fork from her hand. The clatter brought Nathan running, but by the time he arrived, the mirror was clear again. He tried to soothe her, though his own nerves betrayed him. The air in the house seemed heavier now, thick with the weight of unseen eyes. Emma, however, treated the presence as if it were something natural. She told her father that the lady only walks through the mirrors, she doesn't hurt anyone. Then she added a detail that made Nathan's blood run cold. She keeps calling my name, really soft, like she's trying to sing me to sleep. On the 5th night, the haunting came for Nathan himself. He dreamed of the house as it had stood in the 1800s. Riders on horseback gathered outside, one of them a man whose face he recognized from history books, President Andrew Jackson. The man's voice cracked like thunder in the dream. You cannot escape. The Bell Witch has never left. Nathan woke with a jolt, drenched in sweat. And at once, 3 sharp knocks reverberated through the wall beside his bed. The next morning, shaken, he went to the town library. He dug through brittle clippings and fading records, piecing together the old legend, the mysterious knocks, the disembodied voices, objects hurled across rooms, sudden deaths. There it was in ink. Andrew Jackson had indeed come to this house, but fled after a single night, declaring it too cursed even for him. Nathan carried the papers home, spreading them across the table. Claire paled as she read, while Emma traced her small fingers across photographs of the old Bell home. That was when the mirror in the parlor rattled violently, a sharp crack splitting the silence. They all turned. The glass shivered, misting over, and a sentence scrawled itself in crooked strokes, as though carved by a finger no one could see. I never left. No one dared breathe a word. The silence pressed down, broken only by the pounding of their own hearts. And then she appeared again. The woman in white drifted across the mirror's surface, visible to all three at once. Her face remained hidden, but her presence swept through the room like a frost. Only then did the family understand. They were not merely living in an old house. They had stepped directly into the heart of a curse, and the way out was already beginning to close. Ow! The nightmares had bled from history into the present. Night after night, the Bell house grew heavier with dread. At sunset, the air turned unnaturally cold. Breath rose in clouds. Knocks rolled along the walls, mingling with whispers that made no sense in any human tongue. Nathan fought to keep calm. He locked every window, checked every room, but nothing stopped it. Claire was wasting away, her face hollow, eyes bruised from sleepless nights. She no longer only heard the lullaby. Now she felt a frozen hand settle on her shoulder whenever she stood alone in the kitchen. She would spin around and find nothing, only the wooden chair, always turned toward her, as if someone had been sitting there all along. One night, Emma woke in tears. She pointed at the bedroom mirror, sobbing. She's looking at me, she's in the mirror, but her eyes are sewn shut. Claire rushed to hold her daughter, but when she lifted her gaze to the glass, she saw it too. The pale face of the woman in white, her eyes crudely stitched with black thread, her mouth stretched open, as though to swallow every sound in the room. Nathan, panicked, yanked the blanket from the bed and covered the mirror. But the moment he did, the lullaby rose again, this time right at his ear. The melody twisted, warping into a broken hymn, layered with the faint cries of children. A crushing weight pressed down on his chest, stealing his breath, until Claire's frantic screams of his name shattered the grip. At dawn, they resolved to take Emma away, to stay with friends in town. But at the door, the child collapsed into terrified sobs. She won't let me leave. Every door seized shut at once, unmoving even under Nathan's desperate force. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the house into pitch darkness. From the hallway came footsteps, bare feet, measured, steady, drawing closer. Nathan pulled Claire and Emma tight against him, but from the mirror in the parlor, still shrouded in the blanket, came a piercing crack. Glass split open, not to reveal wood beneath, but a hollow yawning dark, like the mouth of a gate. From within poured the lullaby, clearer, louder, layered in a chorus of voices. Dozens of them, women's voices, some young, some ancient, each intoning the names of the Bell family across the generations. Emma's gaze locked onto the fracture. Her body trembled as though pulled forward. Claire clutched her tighter, sobbing, while Nathan tried to drag them away. but his legs had grown heavy, as if the house itself was rooting him to the floor. And in that moment, Nathan understood. This was not the work of a single spirit. They were ensnared in an inheritance of evil, a legacy stretching back to the 19th century. What the Bell family once endured was now reborn, binding them to a curse that had never been broken. That night, as the moon hung pale above the window, the Bell house was no longer a home. It had become a ritual made flesh, where past and present bled into one, and at the center stood Emma, the child whom the voices longed to claim. Kneel bow. The final night began with silence. No knocking, no whispers, only a suffocating stillness draped over the Bell house. Nathan felt his skin crawl. This was no peace. It was the storm crouching low, waiting to break. Emma slept fitfully in her mother's arms. Claire tried to lull her with a soft song, her voice trembling. But halfway through, horror struck her. It was not her lullaby. It was the lullaby, the same dreadful tune that had haunted their nights. The melody wasn't hers. It was being forced through her throat. She stopped at once, clutching Emma tighter, her breath caught in fear. In the darkness, the cracked mirror in the parlor began to split further. New fractures webbed across its surface, glowing faintly like congealed blood. The blanket Nathan had draped over it tore away, flung aside as if ripped by an unseen hand. Nathan charged forward, seized a chair, and hurled it at the mirror. But instead of shattering, the glass swallowed it whole. The chair vanished into the black, leaving not even the sound of impact. From within, a lullaby swelled, clear, harmonious, sung in both a woman's voice and a child's. Emma's eyes snapped open, glassy and vacant. She whispered, "She's calling me." Claire sobbed, clutching her tighter. But a freezing wind surged out of the mirror, whipping their hair, numbing their skin. Nathan wrapped his arms around them both, trying to pull away. But Emma fought violently, with a strength that no child should possess. In the chaos, Claire's grip slipped. Emma broke free. The little girl walked toward the mirror, calm as though stepping into an embrace. Nathan lunged after her, screaming until his voice tore, but he caught only the hem of her dress before her small body passed through the fissure of light. And then, silence. The lullaby ceased. Emma was gone. The mirror sealed itself, the cracks knitting closed until only a flawless pane remained. It reflected back the hollow, broken faces of Nathan and Claire, two parents staring at the space where their daughter had stood. By morning, the police arrived. They found no evidence of intrusion, no forced doors, no broken windows. The house lay quiet, as though nothing had ever happened. Emma was simply gone, leaving Nathan and Claire shattered in their grief. In her bedroom, on the small bed, lay the knitted doll. Its button eyes had been stitched shut with black thread, the work precise, deliberate, like the final act of some invisible hand completing a ritual. And so, in Adams, Tennessee, the curse of the Bell Witch never ended. It only waited for the foolish, for the hopeful, to step inside and feed it anew with fresh souls. Pow! In Montana, nestled among mist-laden mountains and dense pine forests, lies a lake so clear it is known as the Mirror Lake. Locals whisper that its surface is a veil between two worlds, a place where death never truly ends. They warn that anyone who gazes too long will lose themselves, while, at times, the departed will stare back from below. On nights when the moon is full, the lake glows like glass, reflecting not only what exists above, but also what was never meant to exist at all. Yoni, child. Daniel, a former professor who had devoted his life to philosophy, arrived in Montana with nothing more than an old suitcase and a soul weighed down by grief. The sudden death of his son had carved an emptiness in him that no words or wisdom could mend. He chose Mirror Lake as his refuge, for it was said that the silence there could soothe even the most broken heart. On his first night, he sat at the shore, watching the moon scatter into 1,000 shards of light across the glassy surface. The lake was so still that every small movement of his body reflected back with unnerving clarity. Yet, something in the mirrored eyes staring up at him was not aligned. The reflection lingered a beat too long. Its faint smile faded, though Daniel was certain he had not smiled at all. A lone woman rode past in silence, her silhouette small and fragile against the shroud of fog. The ripples her boat left behind stretched outward, and Daniel saw more than her shadow on the water. For a fleeting moment, there appeared a line of figures standing behind her, motionless, waiting, before dissolving as the waves smoothed over. Daniel shut his eyes, desperate for stillness, but even in darkness, the lake remained carved into his mind. It was not simply water. It was a vast, unyielding mirror, a threshold waiting for something else to step through. Ni, pai shui. In the days that followed, Daniel returned to the lake every afternoon. Sitting for hours on the shore, his gaze fixed on the crystal-clear water. The light shifted with the passing hours, yet the lake always retained its cold, mirror-like sheen, reflecting every cloud, every tree, every line of his face. And yet, at times, that reflection lagged a beat behind, as though it hesitated before responding. One evening, just as night fell, Daniel saw a figure appear beneath the surface. It was not his own reflection. It was a boy, standing in the still water, eyes wide open, staring upward. Daniel's heart clenched, for in that instant, the figure was achingly familiar. The narrow shoulders, the youthful face, it was his son, the one who had died in a terrible accident the year before. Daniel leaned closer. The surface of the lake remained smooth, lit only by the moon stretched into a blinding white streak. But below, the boy smiled. That smile did not exist in Daniel's last memory of him. It was slow, fixed, as if carved into an invisible sheet of glass. He reached out, touching the water. It was icy, seeping into his bones. Ripples spread outward, distorting the boy's face for a brief moment before it returned whole again. But this time, the boy's lips moved, as if whispering. Daniel heard no sound, yet the ripples against his skin formed a rhythm, like a voice trapped deep in a throat. Across the lake, a boat glided past. The woman who rowed sat motionless, her gaze fixed on Daniel. Her reflection on the water warped, stretched, and pressed close to the boy's image. But beneath the surface, her face was not the same. Her skin was pale, her eyes hollow, empty as a winter lake. Daniel turned away, and when he looked back, his son was gone. The following night, he returned again. This time, the boy appeared more clearly, as though rising closer to the surface. The moonlight traced his delicate features, but in his eyes lingered a heavy shadow. Daniel realized the small figure was standing in a warped world, a twisted version of the lakeside, where trees bent unnaturally and the sky lay torn apart. Grief and longing bound him in place. He knelt, his gaze locked on the image below. The lake had become a pane of thick glass, one that could shatter with the slightest touch. Every droplet of dew that fell rippled outward, like a door creaking open. And in the dreadful silence of the night, Daniel felt a hand, small and frozen, gently press against the shadow of his own, reaching out from the other side. Dinni, wawa, hana, ha, kamsor. The next night, the wind from the forest blew cold, carrying the damp rot of decayed pine needles. Daniel sat by the lake, his gaze fixed on the still surface. The lake was like a massive pane of glass, reflecting the torn sky and the smudged silver moon. But when he leaned closer, the reflection warped, twisted like a painting in a distorted mirror. In the lake's surface, the pine tree behind him bent like broken bones. The moss-covered rocks became heaps of skulls. And in the midst of that warped scenery, the boy appeared again. His dark eyes shimmered, never leaving Daniel, his mouth opening in silence. Daniel strained to listen. At first, it was only the rustle of wind in his ears, but then an unfamiliar sound rose from the depths of the lake. A call, thin as a thread, stretching into the air, seeping into his chest. It wasn't just an echo. It seemed to come from inside his own ribcage, forcing his heartbeat to follow its rhythm. The surface of the lake trembled faintly, ripples crawling outward, stopping abruptly, as if something below was pounding against the glass, desperate to break through. Daniel trembled, but could not pull away. The moonlight stretched into a sharp streak, like a blade dividing two worlds. The boy raised his hand, the small palm pressing against the surface. Daniel's reflection did the same, but the movements didn't align. The figure in the water reached first, then lagged, then convulsed. The eyes of his reflection were filled with darkness, nothing like his own on the shore. The sound from the lake swelled, becoming a long, hollow drone, like a voice calling through thick glass. Daniel heard his own name, fractured in the endless echo. Each thread of sound tugged at him, promising reunion, promising an escape from grief. On the water's surface, the warped world expanded, spilling into the reflection of the sky. The moon fractured into a broken circle, its light dripping down like molten glass. Figures began to emerge behind the boy, hazy, motionless, their faces empty, yet their eyes all fixed on the shore. Daniel felt the ground beneath him soften. Stones, grass, everything seemed to slide toward the depths. The air thinned into mist, his lungs filled only with the smell of cold water. In that moment, a tiny hand broke through the surface, grasping his wrist. The skin was icy, but the grip so strong it sent blood surging through his veins. Daniel froze, caught between terror and yearning. The sound from the other side turned into a low, resonant whisper, inviting him across, urging him to close the gap between two worlds. And the lake was no longer a mirror. It had become a door, trembling like a thin veil ready to shatter, ready to swallow anyone who dared to look too deep. On the fourth night, Daniel returned to the lake on trembling legs. Moonlight poured down, and the water's surface gleamed like an enormous mirror. So cold it seemed that if he bent just a little closer, his skin would freeze into glass. The wind was still, yet the lake was not calm. It moved slowly, like a breathing creature, each rise sending ripples outward, pulling the darkness into its depth. Daniel looked down. The reflection no longer resembled him. The face in the water was older, its eyes sunken, its mouth stretched wide in a crooked grin. Behind that figure stood dozens of shadowy forms, arranged in a crescent, their hollow eyes fixed ahead. They encircled the boy, not touching, as if awaiting a ritual. The world around the shore began to change. Straight pine trees twisted and split, their hollow trunks peeling like charred skin. The sky cracked apart, stars dragged into streaks of falling light that plunged into the water. Daniel blinked, but the warped world remained, spreading from the reflection and bleeding into reality. He reached out to touch the lake. The surface was no longer cool and clear. It had thickened, viscous like molten glass. The boy pressed closer, his small hand tugging gently. Daniel leaned forward, his whole body weighed down, bones heavy, as if drawn by a magnetic pull below. The whispers rose into a chorus, echoing like an unseen choir. Their invitations wove with the breath of the wind, forming a ceaseless, resonant hymn. Daniel's ears rang, but within the chaos he heard his name distinctly, repeated, rebounding, as though the lake itself was calling him. The ground beneath him gave way. The damp grass softened into patches of cold mud, then dissolved, leaving nothing but water stretching into infinity. He was no longer sitting on the shore, but standing upon a colossal mirror where above and below merged into one. With each step he took, his reflection moved in reverse, lagging, distorting, until it no longer resembled him at all. The boy smiled. It was a rigid smile, like a crack etched across glass, stretching toward his ears. Within the warped reflection, the boy shone brighter than the moon itself, as if he were the center of the lake. The figures around him bowed their heads, leaned toward Daniel, as though welcoming one who had crossed the threshold. Daniel tried to step back, but behind him there was nothing, only the endless expanse of mirrored water. No shore, no ground. The sky above and the lake below blended into an empty void. He cried out, but his voice shattered instantly across the glowing surface, returning as a murmur not his own. A cold wind swept through, and in that instant, the boundary collapsed. The lake cracked apart, not with ripples, but like shattering glass, shards of blinding light scattering into the air. Daniel was pulled downward, his hands clawing helplessly at nothing. His son's image reached out, close enough to touch, but when his fingers closed, he grasped only emptiness. The world twisted, collapsing into a colossal whirlpool of silver, and at its center, the lake had become an open door, devouring the moonlight, and Daniel's soul along with it. Ah! As the silver vortex swallowed his body, Daniel fell into a bottomless expanse. There was no water, no sky, only shattered light drifting around him like fragments of suspended glass. In the emptiness, his heartbeat echoed back at him, merging with an endless murmur. From afar, a figure emerged. It was not his son, nor the faceless silhouettes that had once stood around the lake. The figure was tall, its body sheathed in a dull, translucent shell of glass, shifting with glimmers of liquid light. Its face bore no features, only a flat mask that reflected countless distorted visages, including Daniel's own, repeated, twisted, stretched into fractured smiles. The keeper of the lake moved forward, each step soundless, yet every stride cracked the mirrored ground beneath him, only for it to seal itself again. Around him, pale souls scattered back like mist swept aside by wind. They flickered, writhing, but did not scream. Instead, Fragments of their reflections slipped away from their bodies and vanished into the void. Daniel staggered. He realized the boy was no longer there. His son's image had been nothing but a lure, an illusion the lake conjured to draw him across. The truth now stood before him. The keeper of the lake allowed no one to return. A massive hand clad in glass reached out and pressed against his chest. The cold pierced through flesh and bone, and his heartbeat ceased. Daniel looked up and saw himself reflected in the keeper's mask. His face elongating, dissolving into trembling ribbons of light, merging into the creature's body. No gravity, no will remained. Daniel felt his very self unravel, memories splintering and scattering like cracked glass. The image of his son receded, fading like a photograph drained of color, until it disappeared entirely. The keeper stepped back, letting him sink into the whirlpool of reflections. Daniel was no longer the lost wanderer. He had become one of the silent figures that once stood around the boy. His eyes were empty, his body transparent as a frozen lake in winter. Above, the surface sealed itself, smooth as though it had never stirred. Moonlight slid across, reflecting the night sky in flawless silence. On the shore, the woman in the boat dipped her oar, and the vessel drifted through the thickening fog. For just a moment, her eyes tilted toward the lake, where a new shadow had joined the endless ranks of those who would never be freed. And from that night on, Daniel never returned to the shore. Azimu. Under the light of a new moon, the clouds were as thin as gauze. The dirt road leading into the forest was so quiet that the sound of dry leaves sounded like bones scraping against each other. Alex walked ahead, the flashlight hanging from his backpack swaying, cutting a thin line of light through the fog. Maya followed closely behind, her hands cold, each step like she had to be pulled out of the mud. Leo walked behind, tripod and camera bag slung over his shoulder, his eyes deep but alert, scanning the surroundings like a sentry, silently counting his breaths to keep calm. They had read the worn-out diary, an anonymous priest written in blotchy reddish-brown ink about a village forgotten because of its debt to shadows. Maya stopped abruptly, grabbing Alex's sleeve. Do you feel it? Like someone hungry? Alex laughed, reassuringly in a light voice.
I don't know, guys. I'm getting a really bad feeling about
this. Perfect for a Halloween video. He raised the camera, panning around. Fog, trees, darkness. The lens caught a few specks of dust that shone like fireflies, or other things, small and staring back. Then the village appeared without warning, without a single light, without a puff of smoke. Only the air was heavy as a stone pressing on the chest. In front of the village gate, a rickety sign hung by a rusty string. Alex brought the flashlight closer. Burned black words were etched into the wood. The unharvested shadows will find the curious. Maya took a step back. Alex smiled again, but his eyes were trembling. He pushed the gate open. The hinges made a long, screeching sound, like someone sucking in a breath to contain the pain. Inside, the village streets were filled with mud and leaves. The doors were half open, like cave entrances. Alex led the group into the first house, its wooden floors creaking. The musty smell mixed with the smell of burning incense crept into Maya's nose, making her cough slightly. On the table, an overturned earthenware bowl still lay. Alex flipped the bowl over. Below was a black and white photograph, blurry and cracked. A group of people in brown shirts, holding sickles, standing in the middle of a rice field that had been harvested to the stump. Leaving the house, they walked deeper. Every strange sound began to creep around them, light footsteps behind them. But when they turned around, there was only mist, sighs from the abandoned well, whispers mixed in the wind, like many voices overlapping. Not harvested yet. Alex leaned into each door, panting with hunting instinct. Blurred figures began to touch the edges of the frame, just the corners of eyes. But Maya could clearly see a pair of eyes red as burning coals peering through. She grabbed Alex's hand so hard it hurt. "Alex, stop. It's a trap." Alex stubbornly, "I just need a few more shots." Suddenly, a window banged as if someone had crashed into it. All three spun. Behind the cracked glass, a face appeared for a moment. Hollow, eyes two dark red holes, mouth open but making no sound, then suddenly gone. Alex dropped the camera to the floor, the indicator light still flashing. They gathered their things and ran to the middle of the village. There, a small square led into many crisscrossing alleys. Houses on both sides changed positions. Windows seemed to turn to watch them. Leo counted his steps, but the count kept slipping away, as if someone had broken the numbers in his head. A hand reached out from the void and grabbed Leo's wrist. Leo jerked, jumped back, the other hand flailing reflexively, leaving 5 long purple marks on his skin, like the marks of fingers without flesh. They were lost in a corridor, in the village. Maya closed her eyes, took a deep breath, trying to find a beat other than her own. And she heard it. Under her feet, in the ground, something moving. Like many hands crawling, searching for calves, ankles. "Don't stand still," Maya whispered. "They can pull if we stand still." They continued walking, and then the corridor suddenly opened in front of a small church, the bell tower broken in half, the clock face frozen at 3:13. Alex pushed the door. The smell of burnt incense came like a wave. On the altar, portraits were pasted on top of each other. Peasant faces, dark eyes, gentle but deep down were tired and resentful. Some of the photos were torn, revealing behind them were old words, called to pay rice tax, didn't return, strange disease after harvest, missing in the well. The paper shook even though there was no wind. A dry bell rang from the broken tower, not knowing who had rung it. The candles in the church flickered, then flared up a little before going out. Maya held her head. "They're coming!" Leo grabbed Alex's shoulder. "Go, now!" But the crescent moon suddenly rushed out from behind the clouds, casting silver light on the broken window. And as the moonlight touched the church floor, from the dark corners, figures began to step out. A figure approached Alex, reaching out to touch his collar. He was lifted, his feet kicking into the air, a scream stuck in his throat as if swallowed by the thick air. The smell of corpses and incense smoke mixed with the smell of burning straw lingered around. Alex was mumbling, his hands flailing. Leo let out a low growl, lunged forward, grabbed Alex's stomach, and pulled him back. He felt those dry, scratched fingers dig into Alex's skin like hooks. He pulled hard. Alex's body fell into Leo's hands like a sandbag, both of them rolling down the church steps. Maya, still holding her head, suddenly opened her eyes, grabbed the metal bracelet, put it on Alex's wrist, her hands trembling. "Alex, the number, the document in the diary." Alex gasped. He rummaged through his backpack and pulled out a piece of paper marked with a marker. On it, under the phrase, do not call their names. There was a short, hastily written and ugly verse. The shadow demands its share. The person returns the favor. The black fire shines, the boundary opens. When the moon is a scythe, place the ring between the shadow and the bone. Maya recited in a whisper. She placed the Gianchio ring in the space between the three people and the shadows. The ring did not touch the ground. It hung there, as if tied to something invisible. A very soft crack, like a tight string being cut. A few shadows dissolved like smoke. Only their red eyes fell like upside-down fireflies, extinguished in the air. The wall cracked open like a mouth. Portraits pasted on the wall fell out, flying around in the wind that came from nowhere. Breathing, the sound of wood groaning, the sound of people screaming from the ground. The passages outside, seen through the windows, seemed to change places, retreating when someone tried to step forward, sliding like the surface of water. Not long enough. Just hold them. A little, Maya said, her eyes not leaving the circle. Leo lifted Alex up. Which way? Maya closed her eyes, feeling. Everything was like a moving maze, but there was a rhythm. The rhythm of the forest. She opened her eyes, pointing towards the side door of the church. They rushed out. The circle of judgment drifted along, following Alex like a black bird. Shadows spread out from both sides of the alley. A dry hand jumped up from the ground, grabbed Alex's ankle. He almost fell. Leo bent down and hit hard. The hand shattered into cold ash. Don't stand still, Maya reminded. The shadows rushed forward, not slow this time. The circle of judgment shook, emitting a sound like metal rubbing against stone. Maya read the awkward words again, her voice starting to break. The largest shadow, probably the shadow of the old village chief from years ago, stretched out, its eyes red like two pieces of hot iron. It touched the edge of the circle and cried out. It took a step back, just one, but enough for the three of them to break free of the encirclement, dash through the broken fence, trample on rotting leaves, and breathe in the forest air. Leo ran ahead, then Alex, Maya. Behind them, the village stretched out, trying to hold them back with the alleys sliding under their feet. The wind came. The mist in the village was whipped back like a curtain. The shadows at the edges couldn't get through, their red eyes burning, then fading like dying embers. A long, long sigh, as if the whole village were exhaling. They didn't stop until they were deep in the forest. Leo plopped down, his back against the tree trunk. His hands were shaking, but his eyes were still alert. Alex put the camera on his lap, the light still flashing. I got it, he said, unsure. Maya hugged her knees, put her chin on them, inhaled the smell of damp leaves like medicine. We're out, she whispered. Temporarily. A week later, on Halloween night, Alex sat in his rented room, the window ajar, the sound of cars in the distance like a hazy river. He turned on the camera, reviewed the footage. In the frame, the fog shimmered beautifully like an effect. The door closed by itself, the windows slammed shut, the hallway seemed to stretch out. Everything was there. The circle of judgment appeared in a few frames, black like a hole in the image. There was a very light knock on the door. He looked up. No one. In the silence, a very soft sigh passed by, as if coming from the corner of the wall. Alex stood up, walked to the window, pulled the curtains. Outside on the street, People were laughing, dressing up. Cheap witch and vampire masks danced under the neon lights. When he pulled the curtains back, in the reflection on the glass, Alex saw that behind him there was not only his shadow, there was also a thin, flat, long black streak, like a scythe leaning against the corner of the room. He turned around. The corner of the room was empty. Alex thought to himself, "Stress." The phone vibrated. A message from Maya. "Are you listening tonight?" Alex was about to reply, "Listen to what?" when he heard it. In the sound of the wind seeping through the crack of the door, an old sound crept into the room. Tired but persistent. Not harvested yet. Leo texted the group, "Don't be alone. Lock the door." Alex looked up at the door lock. It was still locked. Then he looked at the floor. There were a few small black dust particles, like ash, lying in a semicircle at the threshold. The circle of the orb had fallen back at the edge of the forest that night. But here, something had left the mark of another circle. Alex opened the cupboard, looked for the priest's diary. On the last page, under the red-brown ink, there was a new line. The ink still wet, the smell of burnt incense lingering. "They can't harvest the body. They will wait for the soul." He took a step back. In his mind flashed that red eye. The circle of the guardians may be temporary, but the border is real. He texted back, "Come to my place tonight. Stay. Stay." Maya replied with a moon icon. Leo replied, "I brought the rope." Alex smiled, half believing. What was the rope for? But then he remembered the moment they'd grabbed each other in the church. Perhaps that very bond was the only thing the shadow couldn't cut. Outside the window, Halloween bustled and then faded. Inside, 3 people sat side by side, candles placed around them, salt sprinkled on the threshold in a circle toward the window. "If they need a way out, give them a way out, not in," Maya whispered. Leo tied the rope around the 3 people's wrists, linking them like another circle, made of material so ordinary that even ghosts despised it. But ordinary is hard to break. Near midnight, when the new moon pierced the clouds once more, the whisper came again, clearer, as if someone was standing close to their ear. "Not harvested yet." Alex took a deep breath. "We are not your fields. You have been taken. We do not pay with us. If necessary, we will tell. We will name what happened." Maya nodded, eyes closed as if listening. Leo gently tightened the rope. The whisper receded a little, like an old man turning away, disappointed and relieved. The candlelight swayed, then stopped. At the doorway, the half-circle of black ash faded, giving way to the yellow dust particles of the street. They fell asleep as the sky neared dawn. In his dream, Alex saw that field again. The harvesters bowed their heads, the horizon blurred like a stain. But this time, when he looked up, at the edge of the field was a small black line, thin as a thread, the forest. Many years later, every Halloween season, in university clubs or video channels, the story of the Goaty Guy. It was rumored that every 100 years, the village opened its doors to harvest souls. Some people said they saw flashlights swaying in the mist. Some heard whispers like thin knives cutting through the wind. Alex, Maya, Leo did not return. They promised each other, if one day they needed to, they would go together and only together. they still heard a very light sigh